back. Now we've got the biggest group we've had in yet. It's Reverie Group with Compass Realty. So we've got Maddison, we've got Nick, we've got Grant. Hi guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Here. Okay. So I reached out to Ryan to record a podcast because Grant and I were chatting one day. We had been working on a buyer side deal together because Grant went out of town and I was just helping him out while he was gone. And so whenever he got back, I had gotten the clients under contract. And so we just like worked together on it when he came back.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to sound super braggy, but he was like, "You're like a really good agent." Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, thanks." Because you don't always get to work with your teammates in that kind of setting. And so we just got to talking about like who are the good agents in Kansas City? What makes them good? And then like, how do we spread the word that we're good agents? Like, how do you really, in a market where there's like 13,000 agents, put yourself out there so that people do know, like, we are good agents. Like, there are not good ones, but we are good ones. And so we just started talking about that. And I was like, that's what people really need to know about. Like, there are a lot of agents doing things on social media that I don't know are really benefiting people. But if we can talk about and help people understand like what makes someone a good agent and how do you find them, I think that really helps people. Mm-hmm. So here we are.
Awesome.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I think there's a lot of like, not smoke and mirrors, but kind of smoke and mirrors in a way whenever it comes to social media. And so it's cool to like actually get to know people, not just for what they can do on video.
They're cool TikToks and stuff, which is great. Nothing wrong with it. But
well, because you just did your listing video that you just did, was it yesterday?
Yeah.
So good.
No,
so good.
Thank you.
Wes Anderson, right?
Yeah.
It was good. I enjoyed that. But I mean, and that is cool. So it's like an introduction to who you are, right? Mm-hmm. But then you actually have something to back it up, which is cool too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, what is it? It's like I think I would agree with what Maddison says. It's like, it's fun to do the social media thing. I will tell you, I hate social media with a fiery passion, but doing that video got me excited. So, because I just don't do much on social media. But like the thing for me when it comes to social media stuff, I maybe it's just my own particular brand of humor, but I abhor most social media videos when it comes to like real estate humor or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if it feels too like inside baseball, I'm out. I'm just like, God, this is disgusting. It's cringy. It's only for other agents because no one else knows any of this vernacular that you're using. So I know that for me, the agent listing videos specifically that I like the best are ones that are very accessible and would be universally funny.
Right.
Even if this would have taken place in some place outside of like a listing presentation, would it still be funny? Mm-hmm. That's like the marker for me. Then I'm like, okay, this is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny that you say that too, because your handle, isn't it? Nick doesn't have a smartphone.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like you're like defying social media, but you're like, I have to do something, right?
Yeah, it's your personality.
You literally used no words.
Yeah, I didn't even have to talk. It was great.
That's
But that goes back to when I was in 7th grade. I was in forensics, and the only time I ever won an award for acting was for pantomime. So the second I started opening my mouth is the second the awards dried up in high school. So I was like, okay, I just stick with no words.
So just put my face on camera.
Yeah, Gwen Stefani.
It will be
good.
No, that's good.
Love it.
Okay, so what do you guys think makes a good agent? Because I feel like we have so many stories. Like on the way here, I was just thinking about all these stories that I could share about interactions with clients, but also like how I've observed you guys in real estate. And so, what comes to mind when you think about what makes an agent a good agent?
Well, I mean, I think for me, one of the things, so when Sarah and I bought our house, there was it was our first time. We knew nothing about anything. And, the agent that we used was just fine, but there were things that were just missed that I don't think is any fault of the agent, but just like not understanding that, hey, it's our first time. We literally know nothing.
Right.
So for me, I know that whenever I meet with clients, especially like first time home buyers, I try to make sure that they understand how much it's going to cost up front to purchase a home. So I give them some sort of like an estimate of like, hey, it's good to have this to this amount of money saved up. If you don't, let me know now, because I'll need to build something into the contract. And then beyond that, like I kind of walk folks through like giving chunks of information, because there's just so much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a simple process, but there's just like tons of ins and outs all along the way. So I try to give folks little chunks of information, but the main thing for me is I want to make sure that my clients aren't surprised by any sort of costs that they weren't expecting.
Right.
So I try to make sure that everybody has a very clear understanding of how much the whole process is going to cost, not just down payment closing costs, but also inspections and appraisal and all that kind of thing. So I try to do that. And then beyond that, I try to just let them know upfront my strategy for trying to get them into a house, like when it comes to like offers, that kind of thing. And then outside of that, it's just making sure I have very good communication. Like I always try to make sure I'm checking in at least once a week. I let folks know like, hey, you're going to be hearing from me a lot up front. But
And
once
he's
we're
calling
past,
you.
oh yeah, I'm calling.
He's
I'm a
not
phone
texting
first.
you.
I'm a phone first guy. I'm a phone first guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like after inspections and appraisals done, like it's kind of a lull. So I try to like set expectations the whole way, so folks know exactly how much communication should or should not be happening, so they're not like freaking out.
Right.
Yeah. So I try to communicate like mad the whole way. And then there are other things that we can get into too. So I mean, it's helpful that we have contractors that know how much things are going to cost. It's helpful that we've done a lot of this stuff ourselves too. So we can help folks kind of envision what a house could be if it's not quite there.
Right.
And not only can we give folks pricing, but then we can also give them contacts for people who we trust to do the work for a good price and quality work.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like you say, setting the expectation on the front end, because I mean, it's so easy to speak our own language, right? Be it mortgage or real estate related.
Yeah.
Like you get so far in that you lose that touch with people that have never done it before or haven't done it but 15 years ago or whatever the case may be, and you're speaking and it's a foreign language to it then. So that over communication is so important to keep checking for understanding. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Am I speaking your language here?
Yes.
That's cool.
Well, in some ways it's interesting because like I feel like we almost have to go back to I mean, because we're seasoned at this point. It's year what for you?
4.
And you?
Well, it's your year 5 because I'm in
5.
Oh, 5.
Yeah, you're 5.
I'm like,
Time is a construct. I have no idea what
You're
happened.
5 and you're 4. Okay, this is 8 for me.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that's interesting is like in my experience with agents, because we're also a unique bunch in that we've worked with owner occupants, but we've also had the experience of working with investors. And so in many ways, we've drummed up enough experience with a unique clientele that a lot of agents don't have.
Right.
Especially when you go into other parts of the city. It's not to dog on any other agents, but in many ways, we have kind of both pools that we've gotten to the point where we kind of know how to work any transaction.
Right.
And then across multiple types of real estate. So anything from a single family home all the way up to multifamily and commercial and stuff like that. So that also accumulates enough experience to where we can really speak from multiple angles on any transaction.
Right.
And then the time. It's like so many folks, you go back to COVID and it's like everybody thought they could be an agent because a house with heat was selling.
Right.
And so we withstood that time frame and kind of rode that out. And so now it's at the point where you look back and it's like, holy crap, when you really think about it, you go year over year and like we've gone through a lot, in 4 years, 5 years, 8 years. And that's not to say, we're vets or anything, but I do think that matters. It's like the type of transactions that you're doing, how long you've been in it, and what you've really gone through to be able to speak to for your client base. And, as that relates to how you accumulate your network of people that you send them to for lending, like Nick said, contractors and all that. It's like without the time and the experience, we wouldn't have clients that come to us and say like, I'm going to trust you with the most valuable purchase I make in life. So, I mean, that makes a good agent, I think.
Yeah.
Or they just peace out like everybody did in COVID.
Well, and the fact that you guys get to kind of like share your experience too, like, you have a question that you might help with or vice versa. There's tons of power in that. I mean, you don't have to have 20 something years in the business if you've got 5, 4, 8 all combined.
Yeah.
You
That's a good
can
point.
share that brain power, which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my thing on my team because I don't know half of what most of them know.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful to have them, but they don't want, they don't want to have to do the things that I enjoy doing. So I think teamwork is huge.
Also, the other thing that's interesting too is like, and again, this doesn't mean somebody can't be a good agent if they don't qualify in this regard, but like, if you haven't bought your own house, if you haven't made your own investments, if you haven't done those things, there is a level of experience that you're just not going to have.
Right.
You're not going to be able to speak to it and say like, hey, I've already gone through that for you, basically, kind of paved the way. And now, especially for first-time homebuyers, you can come in and say like, this isn't as scary as it sounds. You know, here's how we navigate this path. So that speaks a lot to it too, because we've all done our own home purchases, but then our own investments as well. So
right. Yeah, that's huge.
Something that I think makes a good agent, something that I take a lot of pride in, especially when it comes to our team, is the way that we show houses to buyers. So I think when we were at local agent on the standard team, like Micah really set a really good standard for this. Plug. But I'll never forget one time when Nick was out of town, I was showing his clients a house. And when we walked through, I wasn't sure at this point, like how many houses Nick had shown them. So I'm just going into it thinking like, this is the first time they've seen a house. And they hadn't, you had shown them houses before. But when we walked in, I was like, hey, just so you know, when I take folks through houses, I'm going to be pointing out everything about the house that I think could come up during inspections, like red flags. It's not to crush your dreams or anything, but I want you to be able to look at the things that are catching your eye and the things that you want to see in a home. But I'm going to point out like how old the hot water heater is, how old the roof is, if I'm seeing any foundation issues, things like that. And your client responded, she goes, oh yeah, Nick, he does the same thing. When he walks through houses with us, he acts like he's moving in with us. And I was like, I loved hearing that, because I do think that, for buyers, especially first-time home buyers, or maybe just folks that don't have a lot of experience with home ownership, they don't know to look for those things. And while an open floor plan is really important, like they also need to know how to look for leaks in the roof or leaks in the ceiling, look at the AC unit, like things like that they wouldn't normally know. And I know that I would certainly, if I could go back, I would choose an agent who would point out those things for me too and educate me along the way. And I know our team does a really good job at that.
I think the thing that you made me think about though is like there's the basics of like walking through a house, knowing how to point stuff out. And a lot of agents can do that. They're at the point where they can do the minor things, almost like pre-inspect on the walkthrough, when you're looking at the house. The other thing that I think kind of rolls into the fold that takes you to a place where you are an advocate is how you negotiate. And especially with all the NAR stuff and really what flew in the face, I feel like of working on the buy side, especially like it kind of took some of that fiduciary out of it, because then you're figuring out how to get paid.
Right.
And so I think the one thing that we've stuck to is like, we're going to put our clients first. And if at the end of the day, unfortunately, if we make a few less dollars, it's like, it's important to serve people the same.
Right.
So that would be another testament to industry change, but we stuck with it and we're still in it. And that's all still unfolding, but it's just it's a posture. And that makes a big difference too.
Yeah, I know for me, usually whenever I'm working with buyers, I always tell them like, so 99% of the time, the seller, it's customary for the seller to compensate both agents' commission. But like, hey, in the 1% chance that is not the case, I will be negotiable with you, because I don't want to be the reason why you can't get into the house that you want to get into. So if it means that I make a few less dollars, like that's totally fine. At the end of the day, I want you to be able to get in the house that you can get into.
Right.
Like, I'll be fine. Like, this is like, I mean, because again, if it's only 1% of the houses that are doing this, it's like at the end of the day, it's not a huge hit to me to make a little bit less on one transaction to make sure that the clients are getting the house that they want to get into.
Right.
So I try to be and I think all of us try to be very flexible on that front.
Yeah. Well, and that's just good business. I mean, and good business begets good business.
Well, and this was that made me think of a crazy situation where it was like, and you'll have folks, I think this is both for agents as well as it is for just clients out there. It's like, you will have experiences as an agent where you will do everything you can to be their advocate and push the same thing you push for every other client. And you'll have folks that still, for whatever reason, don't think that's enough. So like 2 or 3 years ago, it was this crazy deal where there was a cheap house over in South KCMO. It was like 70 grand.
Yeah.
The client was a new investor, got him through bigger pockets, great relationship. We saw like 40 houses.
Right.
And so we get into this whole situation where we're negotiating on this deal. It's supposed to be a turnkey rental. And he's all of a sudden, pinching pennies. And he's just like, I don't know how I'm going to make this work. I don't know how it's going to cash flow. He's like, I feel like all post inspection, I'm going to have a bunch of expenses, on the house before I even get a tenant in there.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, look, man, this is a deal. It cash flows. It was like $250 cash flow turnkey.
Right. Yeah.
It's a $70,000 property.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get in post inspections, we're negotiating whatever. And I basically eventually just said, like, I'm going to go in and do these repairs.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody I did it. Okay. I'm telling anybody right now. So I'm going to go in and do some of these repairs. I cut a hole into the flooring, put in a latch door down to get to the crawl space, did a bunch of other repairs in the home, made it to where he wasn't having to come out of pocket for these once he closed. I did this during the transaction. So it was to benefit the seller if they ended up canceling, and it was to benefit him if he actually closed on it.
Right.
We get it all done, and he ends up having some issue with some plumbing, and he calls me, and I made I negotiated my commission down. I made maybe $1,200 on that deal.
Dang.
And he calls me and chews me out and was like, you were just in it for the money, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bro,
Right.
you only knew.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, like, at the end of the day is, like, if he decides to get out of real estate because of that, it's like that's bigger than me.
Yeah.
I did what I could, and I could control what I could control.
Right.
But it's those types of situations where it's like you adapt on both ends.
Totally.
You go to the extreme for a $70,000 house as much as you do for a $800,000 house.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah, but there aren't very many agents out there who are gonna cut a hole in the floor for you.
yeah.
Right.
Like,
Right. Especially on that price point. I mean,
right.
it's
Yeah.
just- it's too easy to say, on to the next one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that I've always had that same philosophy with whenever I did retail. I said I would train my salespeople. I say everybody that walks in the door has $1 million in their pocket to spend today, and treat them that way.
Mhm.
I don't care
Mhm.
what they look like, who they are, what they're shopping for,
Mhm.
whatever. And that's, I mean, I think that's such a cool philosophy to have. In any
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
you know.
For sure. Regardless of budget.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned, so it's like, because I've had instances where I've needed just to like say that, hey, this probably isn't a good fit when it comes to like a client.
Yeah.
But I mean that's mainly because the interesting thing is, like, what I try to do is I always want to like engender trust. So I don't want to make people sign on the dotted line saying that, like, hey, you've never met me before. And this is the first time we're seeing a house, and now I'm locking you into like a 1-year commitment where you're agreeing that I'm your agent in order to even see one house.
Yeah.
Feels a little rough. It feels
But you
like,
do it
you're,
though.
yeah. Well, I'm just saying that there are other ways to do it, because like Zillow has
There are,
like
there
the non-exclusive touring agreements.
Yeah.
There's also non-exclusive buyer agency agreements that you
Mhm.
can do.
Mhm.
And so that kind of stuff matters too, because if someone's like trying to lock you in for a year-long commitment right off the bat, I know that may be like industry standard, but it's like, they know nothing about you. You know nothing about them. And even whenever we finally sign one, I know that all of us, this was a good thing from our initial brokerage that we started doing real estate in. Like, what they had us do was they would have us write, like, buyer or broker or seller or broker may cancel this contract at any time. All they have to do is like send a text or an email.
Yeah.
And that way it lets folks know that it's like, hey, like, I'm holding you with an open hand.
Not
Like,
something blood.
I'm not trying to like
Gosh.
hold on to
Yeah.
you real tight. But what's funny is, like, I mean, I had a client where I told him, like, hey, here's the deal. Like, I work for you for free.
Yeah.
Which is true. Like 99% of the time I work for you for free. And that made him not trust me at all.
Whoa.
It was
Oh.
very strange. I mean,
Oh.
this is a person who like said he was a wholesaler, and he knew what was going on. But it was just interesting. I've never had something quite like that, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that I can engender trust. And every step of the way, he's like, I don't trust you that much more,
Right.
because you're like, how are you getting paid?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is the way it just kind of goes.
Right.
But the other way that can go too is, like, when it comes to agents, is I know that all of us try to make sure that we're willing to play ball and be fair with the other side.
Yeah.
Because there are agents that I have like a short list in my head of people that I hope to not have to do a transaction.
Okay, this
Name
is
them
so
all.
good that you're bringing this up because I wanted to touch on this too.
Yeah. So it's like, for me, if one agent or the other is going to play just extreme hardball, like it really hurts everybody.
Right.
It really hurts everybody because it's going to scare the living snot out of the other side's client that they're not willing to do anything.
Right.
And it's just going to tank a deal and no one wins. So the buyer that wanted to get into this house or the seller that wanted to sell the house is now no longer able to do it because of an agent. Just kind of going to the extreme on stuff because if you've been doing this long enough, you know what is reasonable to ask for and not reasonable to ask for. And obviously as far as like industry standard stuff, and then obviously you're going to have other things that the clients really care about. And so you can bring those things up, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to be a win-win for everybody or everybody loses. So if one part of the chain, like if either agent is not playing ball, then it can really hurt the client.
Right.
So like I try to make sure that whatever I'm doing, like I have I'm advocating for my client. And also I want to make sure like a deal can get done.
Right.
So I try to set expectation in that regard too.
That's the same thing. So like the way I've articulated that even to co-op agents is basically like, hey, we're going to try our best to make this a win-win scenario.
Yeah.
And if this falls through, it's going to be because a third thing comes in that we can't control.
Right.
Yeah.
But we are both going to work on this together to the point where everybody knows, hey, we're pushing this forward as much as possible. And that third thing that comes in is sometimes it's the lender.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the home inspection. Sometimes it's the stuff that you can't clear. Sometimes something happens in the client's life. You can't control those things.
Right.
But the things that you can control is going up to the bat for your client and then telling the other agent, like, hey, this can be a win-win.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be the car salesy stereotypical agent.
Right.
It's going to push, this thing to where it's uncomfortable for somebody.
Yeah.
And so anytime that is the environment around a transaction, it's like, it really never has issues.
Right.
It's the ones where folks think they can push and control and
win.
win. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like somebody wins, somebody loses. And it's like, okay, you're going to make that happen.
Yeah.
You've pushed it out into the space.
Right.
Yeah.
So on our team, one way that we meet new clients is through Zillow. So we pay for Zillow leads, like we do that. And so we'll get folks who, like, if you go on Zillow and you click like tour this property, it'll connect you with a real agent in Kansas City, and you might get connected with us. And so with as many agents as there are in Kansas City, you would think that every person here would know an agent, and maybe they do, but they've forgotten about them, or maybe they don't trust them. But if you aren't sure what agent you're going to use, here's just like some things that we can help tell you that will guide you. So I met with a Zillow lead client, and one of the questions they asked me was, how do you negotiate? Because I think they were first-time home buyers, and they were trying to feel me out if they wanted to work with me or not, which is fine. But I had never had someone ask me that question before. And I just kind of like said the first thing that came to my mind, which was something along the lines of like, well, your best interests are at heart for me. Like I work for you. But when I am communicating with the listing agent on your behalf, I'm kind. And I, again, have your best interest at heart, but we are truly like trying to go after the same thing. They want to sell their house. You want to buy it. So how can we communicate and work together to make that happen so that you're happy and, whatever. So I was like, if you're looking for an agent who is going to like be really intimidating and be like, I'm going to get you everything you need, and they're going down, like, that's just not me. And so I think at the end of the day, that really resonated with them. And I think if you're looking for an agent, ask that question, because it's going to be really telling how they answer that. Because if they're trying to impress you and make it seem like they're this big bad agent who can get shit done, their answer is going to be hopefully a little concerning. But if they are in this career for the right reasons and they want to help you and they want to be a good agent, like they're going to say something along the lines of like, I want to be somebody in the industry who has a good reputation, because if I'm putting in an offer for you and I've had a previous interaction with this listing agent, they're going to remember me, whether I was kind or not. And they have huge sway on if your offer is accepted because of that. So another question you can ask, I mean, if you want to know the reputation of an agent, just call around to a few different brokerages and ask about their reputation. And if you want them representing you, because like Nick said, I mean, we have some mental lists of agents who we don't want to work with. And some of them might be big names in the industry that you might know. So if that's the case, like just call around and ask. But yeah, those agents, they're not going far because nobody wants to work with somebody like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, this is where it brings up a different topic though, but like this is where I'm not concerned about, tech coming in and basically taking over agent jobs.
Right.
It's like there will be a need because it's a people business and it's service based. And when you talk about like AI or something coming in and taking over a bunch of agents, it's like they can take jobs from the bad ones.
Yeah.
Right.
But people still want people.
I mean, it's such a relational business.
It is.
Like,
It's relational, and you want somebody in the trenches with you, and that doesn't mean you have to be a dog. It means you literally just have to show, hey, I'm in your corner. And this is a big purchase. This is anxiety producing. You're going to have a lot of questions.
Right.
You're going to call me even after the freaking thing closes.
Yeah.
And you're going to know XYZ about the house. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
Even if you never buy another home from me.
Right.
And the residual of that is basically like your name just gets put out there as like, hey, that's somebody that I can trust. Even if we never buy another home, who cares? That's just a dude or a gal that I really trust. I enjoyed the experience.
Right.
And if that's not worth it enough for an agent, then like, what are you doing? So
yeah, totally. I mean, I think about our experience buying a house, and like Israel, my boyfriend, he would have never done anything unless he knew exactly who we were working with. As our agent, as our lender, everything along the way. I mean, we had our lender come and sit at our house and like explain the process to him. Wow. I mean, she was a friend of ours, but
he needed that.
He needed that extra touch. To get him to say, I think this is a good idea. We should do this, because it was just terrifying. So I can't imagine, AI can do any piece of that, or it just doesn't make sense.
No. I mean, the only even in the lender business, it's like it's the same thing is true. You can have an AI portion of that adopts a part of the business, but people will still want a person to walk them through all the nuances and kind of the minutia of the whole thing to know, number one, is the AI even right?
Right.
Like it might be auto-generated and it might have the correct numbers in there and it might look right, but they will want a person to give them that stamp of approval, or they'll send it to somebody that they trust to say, hey, does this look accurate?
Right.
And so I'm not concerned from most angles of the business that like we're just going to be out of a job in 10 years.
Well, and I mean, the whole thing with AI, I think that there's a place for it to help people do their jobs better, but I don't think that there's any place where it can just take over.
I'll take the tools, like I mean, especially I mean, like if the tools are available to use to make us better at our jobs, I'll probably be the last person to use it. I mean, hey, but that's the point of it. Is like come in and help us do our jobs better. You're not going to take the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe
I think the other
maybe
thing.
Nick will take his job.
The other thing.
What I said, maybe Nick will let it take his job.
No.
Do yoga. Nah.
The other thing people can do, I think, is like stalk agents' social media, because like I've had clients come to me who like they were working with an agent and they were like, oh, they pulled up to the house and their car had a bumper sticker on the back that completely is not aligning with my views. I mean, so people are paying attention. Like people are paying attention to that. They want to work with someone who like has similar values as them. And I think if you're checking social media, and also be careful what you post on social media for that reason. But seriously, I think personality matches are important. There are some people who I'm really going to vibe with and we're going to feel like friends. And then other people who aren't going to vibe with me. And like, we can't vibe with everybody, and that's fine. So I think that matters too. Like you want to be able to enjoy the agent that you're working with, be it if you're selling a home, buying a home, check their social media, see what they're all about. And I don't know, it'll make all the difference.
Yeah. And that's why I like, again, holding any client relationship like with an open hand, because I readily say like, hey, I may not be the best fit for everybody.
Yeah.
Like I'll work my tail off, but at the end of the day, if there's just like a clash in the way that I communicate, the way that you want it to be communicated, or maybe I'm a little too, because I like to keep things light. And maybe someone's like, no, I just want business. Just give me the business. None of this other stuff. Like I can do that stuff, but at the end of the day, like, or maybe they go to my social media and they don't like it. And they're like, hey, I think we're going to actually go in a different direction. Like, that's fine. That's again, why I put the stuff in the the exclusive buyer agency agreement so that you can get out. Cause I'm not gonna, I remember my parents, like, they were looking for a house right as I got my license. And they had an agent that was really trying to, that refused to sign any sort of cancellation or let them out until it expired. So we had to wait like an extra like month or two before I could get them into anything.
Yeah.
And so agents are like that sometimes.
Right. They
and,
really are.
Yeah. There's
right.
But it's like I guess there's an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset you can have. And so like I try to always live into the abundance, because like there's people are always going to have situations where they're going to be looking to buy or sell a home. Yeah. So if I have that mindset, then I'm not nearly as like holding people with a tight grip, and you're more able to be generous and just be like, yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, if this doesn't work, great. I hope someone else can better meet the needs that you have for, whatever this relationship is supposed to look like. And then I have other people who are really loving it. And it's like, great. Okay. We're working.
Right. So the other thing that makes me think too is like the way that I've taken that posture is basically like, if you think about all the times in which you've had stress financially or around your vocation in your life, you've probably put a lot of pressure on the client or put pressure into the space, and people pick up on that. So the whole thing that I've thought is like, if you have a pipeline of people that are working with you and something falls through the cracks, you're not going to blame that individual or blame the marketplace. You're going to basically say like, that's fine. I get it. Yeah, it happens. But I've got 10 other folks that I'm working with right now. So in many ways, like it's costing them business. Like it is what it is. Yeah. But if you have one person that you're working with and that rides on your paycheck and what you're going to provide that month, like it feels a lot more like pressure. Right. And they sense that from you.
Totally. Yeah.
And
oh my
so
God.
That's like the industry shift that could take place is like if folks just had more focus on, I'm just going to build up a pool of people that trust me and that want to work with me, so that then if somebody decides they want to go elsewhere, they don't taste a sour posture from me. Right. They're just like, oh, cool. Grant's cool with that. Like he's got other people that he's servicing.
I feel like that posture is so good, like towards clients, but also toward the whole process, like towards houses too, because it's like when
contract falls through.
When I'm showing houses, like, sure, it's always nice when occasionally I show you one house and you want to buy it. Yeah. At the same time, I don't think that that's the full experience for everybody. No. And I don't think that's the right process for probably anybody. Yeah. So it's like, then I can walk into a house with a client and not expect that they're going to want to offer on it. And the whole process for everybody can be a lot more laid back. We're going to have less cancellations because we're going to make sure that this is the one you want. And, I had a client recently, like it was the second house we saw, and she goes, well, I don't hate it. And I was like, well, we're not offering a house.
Yeah.
Like,
the bar should be, I don't hate it. Right.
That is not where we want to be. And I've kind of had a saying lately too, of when the very first showing, I'm always like, I try to convince buyers not to offer on the first house we see. And people get so taken aback by that. But I'm like, you got to see multiple. Like we're not going into this, like seeing how quick we can get this done. Like this is a huge purchase. Like, and like what you said earlier, like we help homeowners or average home buyers and investors alike, and those meld together. So like, I want to educate folks on like looking at this as an investment too. Like we're not just trying to get you into something quickly. Like this is a big purchase. This is a big deal. And I know that we all have that posture towards it, which is like what you want in an agent.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, it goes back to the time, the experience, the whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have been in it for 30 years. I don't believe that. But I think back to a lady that I showed houses to very early on. And if she listens to this, I'm sorry, because it was so bad. But I started counting at one point. I was like, we saw 48 homes. Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
48 homes. And the whole time she had this, like, she had some budget from some third party thing and she was buying it for them. And it was an investment for them. But the whole time she was mentioning her husband. And so this whole situation is like, all right, why is the husband not coming around? Like, why aren't we seeing houses with him? And she's like, yeah, he's going to come along when, once we're ready to negotiate and we go under contract, he'll be here for inspections. I'm like, is it possible he can just come? Because it seems like we're seeing a ton of houses and it just kind of falls through. And so after like 40 homes, I'm like, all right, I'm showing like 5-10 more houses and I'm done. Yeah. And the last house that we showed, that 48th home, the husband came and he just killed the whole process. And he was like, yeah, we're not doing this.
What?
And I was like, what?
You're like, what did we miss
What did
here?
we,
Like,
what
what?
happened there? So there's even that too of like relationally understanding people enough to know like who's the decision maker with you in your home. Like not that it has to be some hierarchical thing of like you need approval, but talk to people, get to know their life. You know,
Right.
what is their situation?
Yeah.
What's important to them?
Mhm.
You know, enough of those situations has taught me that like it's really hard to get people on board sometimes. And if they're not already on board, you're not going to get them on board.
Right.
And so there's enough of that experience that I feel like we've all had to where that helps us really, really, I mean, from an experience standpoint.
Yeah.
Learn the hard way, as they
Yeah.
say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing that I'm curious about, just to switch gears again, is like I would love to hear, because you know, why, like, I guess what are your values as a real estate agent?
Okay, that's a straightforward, simple question.
Yeah.
What are our values as a real estate agent?
Yeah, like what motivates you, and like what? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like for me, I genuinely love what I do. And so when I have this attitude towards my job of like I don't get the Sunday scaries, like I am more than happy to go out on a Saturday morning and show houses because I genuinely love what I do. That's where I'm starting from.
Mhm.
So, and the reason why I do love it so much is because I get to be with people all the time. I'm like very people oriented and I get to meet new people and I'm helping them on this very meaningful, important part of their life. So, I mean, I feel like, so two of my best friends, Brett and Allison, they were my clients first.
Mhm.
And I feel like we kind of trauma bonded because they were looking at a time in the market when they offered on, oh my God, I don't even know, 10, 12 houses before they got the one. And the reason why they got it wasn't because like we were the best offer. It was because they wrote a very compelling letter to the seller. And he didn't want his house to go to an investor. And he wanted it to go to like someone who was going to really love his home.
Mhm.
And so I think because we had all that time together, just like we're looking at so many houses and we had a lot of fun. But we went through it and we kept at it and we kept at it. And I don't know, for me, that's just so rewarding to see people in a house that they loved, they got it, and we stayed in touch, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I value people. I value their experience. I want to provide them an experience in real estate that's as stress-free as possible. They feel like they know what's going on. They feel like they are educated. They know what they're doing. So just, yeah, those are the things that come to my mind first.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
yeah.
great. Oh, okay. Yeah.
You go.
So I think, yeah. So I think for me, I remember I got into it because my partner Sarah and I we saw a cool mid-century house that was KU has an architecture school. I think it was I forget what it's called now. Gold Evans, and now it's like something else, I think. But it was like a Gold Evans design build house from the architecture school out in Baldwin City. So it was like way out there. But we were looking for a house like with land, and it was a cool mid-century, very interesting architecturally kind of house. So we went out there to an open house that a friend of mine who was an agent was like hosting. And then on our way back, like on a whim, I was like, oh yeah, I think I would like to do this. And then within a month and a half, like I'd taken the test and got my license and everything, and we were off and going.
Right.
But I think for me, like there's something about, I'm someone who like really loves shared experiences with people. So the idea, I love working with owner occupants and seeing like the excitement come over their faces and to be able to walk alongside them throughout the journey. There's something about that I really love, just at my core.
Right.
And then beyond that though, yeah, I really enjoy troubleshooting, figuring out how to make something happen, figuring out how to get creative to make something happen, different ways to make housing work for people. I know Sarah and myself, we actually did house hacking and we didn't even know that was like a thing.
Oh yeah.
Because we knew
Okay,
that we
what's
didn't want
house
to have
hacking?
to. Yeah. So we didn't want to, we wanted our mortgage payment to be lower, to be less. And so what we did is we converted a detached garage into a little tiny house. And we started to like rent that out, as well as like a guest bedroom in our house. And that more than covered our mortgage payment.
Yeah.
And so then after that happened, it's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. And then we discovered that, oh, it's house hacking. So it's like a way for you to like live in a house and make a little bit of money for you while you're in it. And so, so we started to go down that road. But for the other thing that I would say though, that I really care about is, so in my past, like I lived in a hippie commune. I am I'm a bit of an activist. I've worked with the unhoused population in Kansas City for a number of years now. I've done anti-racism trainings for a number of years now. And so I care a lot about like housing in general. And so it's a bit strange that I am in the field of real estate because I'm not the biggest fan of capitalism, but I'm a real estate agent. And so for me, like one of the things that I love is like, so I intentionally want to take Zillow leads in more affordable neighborhoods because I want to make sure I'm connected to working class folks.
Right.
And making sure that they have, I want to give them the best shot at getting into a house as rent continues just to go up here in town.
Right.
And beyond that, like I also think that every neighborhood has something beautiful to offer.
Yeah.
And I know that there are like a lot of agents that will say, hey, don't move here, don't move there. And for me, I'm like, no, there's real value in a lot of these different neighborhoods. And so I'm not going to, safety is subjective. The things that people want is subjective. We know the legacy of racism and how it continues to wreak havoc on our communities. And so for me, like, I want to make sure that I am being very mindful about how I speak about every neighborhood in town, because like every neighborhood does have really beautiful things to offer. Like I lived in the historic Northeast for 5 years. It's one of my favorite neighborhoods in town.
We could do a whole podcast about that.
Yeah.
And just,
absolutely.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of that stuff that I really, really care about. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I want to make sure that folks can get into housing. Oh yeah, I guess the other thing that I do specifically is I didn't do this initially because I just didn't know what I was doing, but I really love working with owner occupants. I have also worked with a decent amount of investors, but I'm only working with investors that are in town and investors that I don't think are going to be like slumlording it up.
Right.
If that makes sense. So I've started to limit that based on some of this because I want Kansas City to be owned by Kansas City.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, you said a couple of things that I'll piggyback off of in terms of values. Because like for me, again, it kind of goes back to the pipeline analogy. It's like if I can uphold the posture of like, hey, the abundance mentality, there's enough for everybody, that's going to reflect who I want to be at the end of the day.
Right.
Both in my personal and in my work life. And a thing that has really come up more lately as housing has just continued to get less and less affordable is like, hey, right now actually might not be the best time to buy a house. And to be open and willing to have that conversation.
Right.
And that is in the best interest of your people that you're serving. I'm not married to the process of needing people to buy a home. I'm actually interested in what's best for people.
Right.
And I think we all align on that. And, whereas again, it's not about the comparison of it, but I think if somebody has a client come into their sphere, it becomes like a tick on a chalkboard. It's like, all right, I got to close them. And I do not have that posture.
Right.
And none of us do.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's a person.
Yeah.
And right now it's challenging because both on the rent side and on the purchase side, it's like we thought post-COVID after the affordability was due to pricing, the prices were going to be the issue. Now it's a whole different deal. Prices are lower, but the cost of getting that loan makes the payment more or less the same. Right. And so now it's a whole unique conversation as well around the financial literacy of it. It's like now we're having a conversation about finances.
Right.
Are we equipped to have that conversation?
Yeah.
And if we're not, who do we lean on to bring in and have that conversation? Right. And so that takes some real intentionality as well. But it's a reflection of like, if I'm doing something unique or different in the business, it's because I'm adapting to what's best for me and my family and the immediate people that I'm close with and that I love. That's going to extend to everybody that I work with in the space.
Right.
And so I'm not gonna do something different for a client or somebody that's seeking counsel that I'm not doing currently. And that'll ebb and flow and adapt and change. Doing very different deals now than was doing in 2020.
Right.
And so again, but that's a reflection of values. It's like, are you pushing people in the same direction that you're going, or are you asking them to deviate and do something different?
Right.
Which is probably a reflection of your head's not the right place.
Well, and it's the same as what you were talking about with working with other agents. I mean, if everybody's winning, everybody's winning.
Yeah.
And if somebody's losing, that sucks for everybody.
That even too. I mean, that goes back to a little bit what Nick's saying about only local investors.
Yeah.
But that spans into a whole conversation about wholesaling. You know, we could do a whole other episode on what does it look like to really purchase real estate in our city. And that spans nationwide, but there's a whole conversation around the win-win thing that you could talk. I mean, if somebody is losing in a transaction, somebody is taking advantage of somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is not something that we are comfortable with. I've had deals where I've said, hey, we need to cancel this deal right now. You need to get out of this deal. There's enough inventory. Even if we have an inventory crisis, we will find a home.
Right.
And I know that each of these guys are the same with that as well.
Yeah. Well said, guys.
Yeah.
I'll never work with anybody else because of your mindsets and how much integrity you bring to real estate. And I mean, we've been in rooms where with other agents where we're like, we don't fit here. And I think we are different. Just the comments that have been made to us, the things that, I don't know, like I've had sellers say things to me like, oh, well, I see you're not really in this price point over here, you know, like in the higher up areas. And it's like, well, I don't care what anybody's budget is. Like I'm helping people. I'm not really focused on trying to get into the luxury $1 million space. Like, sure, if somebody asked me to sell their home in that area, would I do it? Yeah, of course. But like top priority here is like what you were saying, like housing equity and helping people where they're at. And that's what we're in it for. And that's why we do what we do.
Well, again, this
every
goes
day.
back to the experience though, because that's a really important thing. It's like if you have a co-op agent that says something like that to you, because I had that happen. This was years ago, and this was a 7-figure listing. And it goes back to who do we want to be as a quality agent, and the experience level that we've had, what we can speak to in every aspect of the transaction. And that experience was that agent, 30 years in the business, and basically was like, well, have you had enough 7-figure transactions to where you know how to negotiate this thing? Basically is what he was saying.
Right.
And I was like, dude, this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's $100,000 or $1 million.
Right.
Like we're doing this thing the exact same way.
It's
just a couple extra zeros. And that was the conversation. And what I go back to is like, I genuinely believe because we were doing the types of transactions that we were doing, a lot of focus in the city is like, we're doing a larger number of transactions, which I think drums up a larger amount of experience.
Well, yeah.
You know, conversely with folks that might be doing stuff out in the suburbs, which there's nothing wrong with that. You can have a very successful business, be very ethical in your practice. But if you're doing 10 transactions that result in the same amount of income, whereas we're doing 40, it's a little bit of a different experience level.
Well, every single transaction is unique.
Yeah,
you'll learn something with every transaction.
Exactly.
So, I mean, like you said, you do 40, you're learning 40 different, at least 40 different things.
Exactly. Well, not only that, but the inspections on homes in the city. It's like the
Very
experience
different.
level that we've gotten from inspections on 100-year-old homes, as opposed to doing them out in Olathe on a 1985 build. It's a very, very different type of transaction.
Oh yeah,
all the way through. And so that's again where the experience matters. And you know, some of that clients aren't going to care about. They don't care.
Yeah,
but
they can't see.
They can't see. They don't know. They don't understand. They're not going to. They just want you to walk them through it. But I do think they sense it.
Yeah,
and that's important.
Well, I mean, the common theme everybody has said is, you know, you care about the person, the client. You know, it's a people business. And that's what we talked about you guys in one of our meetings. You know, we said, oh, we met with these guys, and everybody's just impressed with how you guys, you know, hold yourselves, your values, like you were talking about, and that's just something that we like being associated with. So,
absolutely.
Why do you do what you do?
Tell us, Ryan. Tell us.
I mean, some of your values.
Really, kind of the same reasons. You know, being able to, I got into it because I borrowed with Leader One initially. Enjoyed the process. I like the business to business side because I get to help. I mean, you guys. My goal is to help you guys do more business, right? But then, like just as an example, I had a friend of mine that bought a house with us. Closed last week or the week before, and it's the same idea. It's you know, it's that feel good of like I helped you do something that was mark something off of your list of you know dreams or your bucket list or whatever it is. And I've been working with one of our loan officers on our team on this incentive to help first time home buyers and you know utilize different programs that are available. like MHGC in Missouri or different things, but being able to say, hey, you might not think you can do it, but we're not going to say no. We're going to say this is how you get to where you want to be, and that's the cool part to me is, you know, we've had a handful, and it's cool to see them light up at the end of the closing.
Yeah.
I own a house. This is cool.
We did it.
We did it. And just the education piece of like, hey, you know, especially I'd say the generation, like half a generation younger than me, has this feeling that this process is so daunting they don't even want to mess with it, right?
Or that it's so out of reach for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to happen.
And it's a different process than it was 20, 30 years ago, but you can do it. You just have to be strategic and have somebody holding your hand and helping you out if you don't know where you're going, right?
Yeah.
And so it's cool to get to be like the first point of contact and say, hey, we can do this. We just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Man, the one thing you said about that's so true is like the converse experience is like you can go, especially clients, whether they're owner occupants, investors, whatever. You can go to real estate events around town and you'll get the feeling that like this is an agent or group of agents or a team just managing their database.
Yeah.
They're just saying, hey, we're going to create a touch point. We'll have an event, come get a snack, you know, get a drink, mingle for a bit. And it's in a cool spot around town, which is great. That's one way to do it. The thing that is so much more exciting to us is like, how do we equip people with tools?
Yeah.
The best example I have right now is like most recently this past week, Community American Credit Union, little plug. Love that bank. We go in to get somebody a bank account, and it's that experience. It's like they sat down, they took the time, they walked through the credit building tools for this individual who has low credit, and we went through 30 minutes of different avenues that this person can go down that is actually going to impact and change their life. And so we talk about doing education, we talk about doing events. Those are the things that we're focused on, is like, how do we equip people with tools?
Right.
Even if for some reason they don't end up using us as an agent, I don't really care.
Right.
That's going to get me more excited to be involved in what we're doing. And I think that's what you guys do very well. And that's how you can create a unique foothold in the business. It's like giving people practical tools that will change their life.
Yeah.
So that's what we're after.
Love it.
That's what we're after.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby.
Love it. Love it.
Well, thanks for having us, Ryan. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming down. We'll have to do another one. Like, you guys had plenty of ideas for next
I have
episode.
so much more to say.
Right.
All day.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Leader One. Thank you, Price Chopper, for the water.
There you go. Price
Hey.
Sponsor us, Price Trapper.
Peace. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.